My girlfriend yelled, "Get out of my apartment, I need space to think." She forgot it was my house. I replied, "You first." Then I changed the locks while she was at work. Her meltdown when she found her stuff in garbage bags on the sidewalk and her key didn't work. Jesus Christ, what a week. I don't even know where to start with this insanity, but here we are. This all went down about 2 months ago, between Tuesday and Friday, and I'm still shaking my head about how delusional some people can be. Background real quick. I'm 33, own a house in a decent neighborhood that I bought 2 years ago. Nothing fancy, but it's mine, and I worked my ass off to afford it. Been dating this chick Brittany for 7 months. She's 29, works at some marketing agency, and talks a big game about being independent and self-sufficient. About 4 months in, Brittany started staying over more frequently. Weekends turned into long weekends, turned into most of the week. She kept her own apartment and leased the whole time, and never changed her address or had mail delivered to my place. Her stuff just started appearing everywhere while she was staying over. I didn't mind at first because things were going well, and it felt natural. She'd contribute to groceries sometimes, and we split takeout costs. Nothing formal, just the basic courtesy of not being a complete freeloader when you're practically living with someone. Here's where I should have paid more attention to the warning signs. Brittany started referring to my house as our place in conversations. Talking about decorating changes she wanted to make. Mentioning how we should get a bigger couch or replace my dining room table. Small things, but looking back, clearly testing boundaries. She also began acting territorial about space and decisions. Got annoyed when I had friends over without checking with her first. Made comments about my bachelor pad setup needing a woman's touch. Started rearranging things to suit her preferences, then getting defensive when I moved them back. The real red flags started 3 weeks ago when Brittany brought up getting keys made. She'd been using the spare key I kept under my back deck planter for emergencies, but wanted her own official copy. Said it was inconvenient having to remember where I hid the spare when she needed to get in during the day. I shut that down immediately. Told her my house wasn't a shared living situation, and key privileges weren't something I handed out casually. That if she wanted her own keys, she could get her own place. She didn't love that response, but seemed to drop the subject. Except, she didn't drop it. Last week I came home to find Brittany had rearranged my entire living room without asking. Moved my TV stand, bought new throw pillows, changed the whole layout. When I asked what the hell she was doing, she said she was making improvements to our space. I told her it wasn't our space, it was my space, and she needed to ask before making changes to someone else's house. She got defensive, saying she was just trying to make things nicer, and I was being controlling by micromanaging every little thing. The argument escalated from there. Brittany accused me of treating her like a guest instead of a girlfriend. Said most men would appreciate having a woman care enough to improve their living situation. That I was being ungrateful and territorial about material possessions. I reminded her that this was literally my house that I paid for and maintained. That appreciating someone doesn't mean giving them free rein to redecorate your home without permission. She could make suggestions, but unilateral changes weren't happening. That weekend, Brittany invited her sister over, without asking me first. I came back from running errands to find them going through my kitchen cabinets and making lists of things that needed to be replaced or upgraded. When I asked what they were doing, Brittany said they were planning improvements for the house. I told her sister she needed to leave and that Brittany and I needed to have a serious conversation about boundaries. Brittany got embarrassed about me asking her sister to leave and said I was being rude and controlling in front of her family. After her sister left, we had the biggest fight yet. Brittany said I was treating her like a stranger in her own home. That after 7 months together, she deserved to feel comfortable and have input on the living situation. That my attitude was proving I wasn't ready for a serious relationship. I corrected her immediately. This wasn't her home, it was my home where she was staying most of the time. There's a difference between being comfortable and taking ownership of someone else's property. If she wanted control over living space, she could get her own place. Brittany said that was ridiculous because we practically lived together already. that I was being petty about legal technicalities instead of thinking about our relationship as a partnership, that normal couples make decisions together about their shared space. I told her normal couples discuss major changes before making them. That partnership doesn't mean erasing property boundaries and ownership. She was welcome to continue staying over, but she needed to respect that this was my house, and my decision-making authority came with that ownership. Monday, things seemed better. Brittany apologized for overstepping and said she understood my position about the house, that she'd been getting carried away with nesting instincts and would be more considerate about boundaries going forward. I thought we'd work through the issue. Tuesday evening, I got home from work to find Brittany pacing around my living room on the phone. She was clearly agitated about something work-related and waving her hands around while complaining to whoever she was talking to. I grabbed a beer and minded my own business. When she got off the phone, I asked if everything was okay. Brittany launched into this whole story about drama at her job. Apparently, her boss had criticized a project she'd been working on and questioned her judgment in front of other coworkers. She was furious about being humiliated and wanted to vent. I listened for about 20 minutes while she ranted about incompetent management and toxic work culture, offered some sympathetic responses and suggestions for dealing with difficult bosses. Thought I was being supportive until she started getting more worked up instead of calming down. That's when Brittany turned her anger toward me, said I wasn't listening properly and didn't understand how stressful her job was, that I was giving generic advice instead of really hearing what she was going through, that men always try to fix things instead of just providing emotional support. I told her I'd been listening and was trying to be helpful, but maybe she needed to talk to someone else if my support wasn't what she needed. She could call a friend or family member who might relate better to her work situation. Brittany exploded at that suggestion, started yelling about how I was dismissing her feelings and trying to get rid of her when she needed support, that I was being selfish and unsympathetic about her problems, that she couldn't believe how cold I was being. The argument escalated quickly from there. Brittany accused me of never really caring about her problems and only pretending to listen. Said I was emotionally unavailable and couldn't handle a girlfriend who had real issues, that I expected her to be some low-maintenance fantasy woman. I told her that was bullshit and I'd spent plenty of time listening to her problems and offering support, that getting angry at me for her work stress wasn't fair, and I wasn't responsible for managing her emotional reactions to situations I had nothing to do with. That's when Brittany completely lost it. Started screaming about how I never supported her and always made everything about myself, how I was selfish and controlling and impossible to have a real relationship with, that she was sick of dealing with my attitude and needed space to figure things out. Then she said the words that ended our relationship. "Get out of my apartment. I need space to think." I stared at her for a second, processing what she'd just said. My apartment. My apartment, the house that I owned and paid the mortgage on every month. The property that she'd been staying at as my guest for the past several months. You first. 2 words that apparently shocked her back to reality. Brittany stopped yelling and looked around like she was suddenly remembering where she was. The house that belonged to me, not her. The place she had no legal right to be if I didn't want her there. Wait, I didn't mean it like that. She started backtracking. I'm just stressed and upset. I need some space to cool down, but I don't want you to actually leave. Too late. You just told me to get out of my own house. Time for you to find somewhere else to think about things. Brittany tried to laugh it off like she'd made a silly mistake. Said she was just overwhelmed and misspoke about whose place it was. That we were both too emotional to have a rational conversation and should table it until tomorrow. I told her there wouldn't be a tomorrow for this conversation. She'd just demonstrated exactly the kind of entitlement and boundary issues I'd been concerned about. That telling the homeowner to leave his own property was the final straw in a pattern of possessive behavior. Brittany begged me to reconsider. Said she was sorry for getting confused and would never make that mistake again. That she'd been thinking of my house as home for so long she'd temporarily forgotten the legal situation. that I was overreacting to an emotional outburst. Pack your shit and get out. I walked to my bedroom and closed the door while she continued trying to explain and apologize. Could hear her pacing around the living room talking to herself and occasionally knocking on the bedroom door. I ignored all of it. Around midnight, Brittany finally left. Heard her gathering some clothes and toiletries, then the front door closing. She'd taken enough for a few days but left most of her stuff behind. Probably thought she'd be back once I cooled down and we could work things out. Wednesday morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day gathering all of Brittany's belongings. Clothes from my closet, bathroom products, kitchen items, books, magazines, decorations she'd bought. Everything that belonged to her went into garbage bags and boxes. Took about 6 hours to collect everything. Amazing how much stuff accumulates when someone's practically living with you for months. Brittany had spread her belongings throughout my entire house like she was slowly claiming territory. By Wednesday evening, I had 15 bags and boxes of her stuff stacked in my garage. Called a locksmith and scheduled them to come Thursday morning to change all the locks. Front door, back door, garage door, everything. Cost me $300 but worth it for peace of mind. Thursday morning, the locksmith showed up at 8 a.m. sharp. Had everything done in about 2 hours. New deadbolts, new knobs, new garage door opener codes. Brittany's key was now completely useless for accessing my property. While the locksmith was working, I gathered all of Brittany's belongings and put them in my garage. Sent her a text that she had 30 days to arrange pickup of her stuff, or I'd dispose of it legally. Left everything organized and accessible for when she came to collect it. Brittany had texted me a few times Wednesday night and Thursday morning, apologizing for losing her temper and asking if we could talk when she got off work. Said she understood she'd overstepped, but wanted to explain her side of things. I didn't respond to any of it. Thursday afternoon around 4 p.m. my phone started blowing up. Brittany calling repeatedly, then texting frantically. Apparently she'd come by my house to try to talk and discovered the spare key spot was empty and the locks were changed. Then she got my text about her belongings being in my garage. The first voicemail was her crying and asking what was happening, why I'd changed the locks and moved her stuff out without talking to her first. That she'd just made a mistake in the heat of the moment and didn't deserve to be punished this severely. The second voicemail was angry, accusing me of being vindictive and cruel for throwing her out without discussion. That I was overreacting to one argument and destroying our relationship over something that could be worked out with communication. By the fifth voicemail, she was having a complete meltdown, sobbing about how she couldn't believe I'd really kicked her out. That she'd thought we had something special and couldn't understand how I could be so heartless. That she had nowhere to go and didn't know what to do. I listened to all the voicemails, then blocked her number. Whatever sob story she was selling, I wasn't buying. She'd told me to get out of my own house and learn that actions have consequences when you cross certain boundaries. Friday morning, Brittany showed up at my work. Reception called to say someone was asking to see me. When I got to the lobby, she was crying and begging to talk. Said she'd been awake all night thinking about our relationship and realized how badly she'd messed up. After about 2 minutes of her pleading, I told reception she was my ex-girlfriend and was harassing me. Asked them to remove her from the building. Brittany started yelling about how I was being unreasonable and cruel. Security escorted her out while she was still screaming. Friday evening, Brittany's sister called me. Apparently, Brittany had been staying on her couch since Wednesday night and was devastated about the breakup. The sister wanted to know if there was any way we could work things out, because Brittany was convinced I was the love of her life. I explained what had happened, how Brittany had been gradually taking over my house without permission, how she'd told me to get out of my own property when she was upset, that crossing that line had ended our relationship permanently. The sister tried to convince me that Brittany hadn't meant it and was just emotional, that she'd learned her lesson about respecting boundaries and would never make the same mistake again, that I was throwing away a good relationship over one heated argument. I told her that good relationships don't involve one person trying to kick the other out of their own home. That Brittany had shown her true colors when she thought she could treat my house like her personal property. Some mistakes end relationships, and this was one of them. Saturday, Brittany left a handwritten letter in my mailbox. 3 pages about how sorry she was and how much our relationship meant to her. How she'd been stressed about work and took it out on me unfairly. That she understood my house was my space and would respect that going forward. The letter promised she'd changed her perspective and learned from her mistakes. That she'd never again confuse whose property was whose or try to control decisions about my home. That she'd do whatever it took to earn back my trust and rebuild our relationship. I threw the letter away without finishing it. Brittany had spent months gradually pushing boundaries and testing how much control she could exert over my living situation. The apartment comment hadn't been a slip of the tongue, it was her true feelings coming out. Sunday morning, I was having coffee on my back deck when I heard someone knocking on my front door. Ignored it for about 10 minutes until whoever it was gave up and left. Later found another letter from Brittany, asking me to please give her one more chance. This pattern continued for 2 weeks. Letters in my mailbox, phone calls from blocked numbers shows up at my workplace and my house. Brittany was clearly not accepting that the relationship was over and kept trying new approaches to get my attention. The breaking point came when she somehow got into my backyard and was sitting on my deck furniture when I came home from work. Turns out she'd convinced my neighbor that she'd accidentally locked herself out and needed to retrieve something urgent from my backyard. Poor guy didn't realize we'd broken up and let her through his yard. I called the police immediately. Told them my ex-girlfriend was trespassing on my property after I'd made it clear she wasn't welcome. The cops showed up within 15 minutes and found Brittany still sitting on my deck like she belonged there. They issued her a trespass warning and told her she'd be arrested if she came back to my property again. Brittany tried to explain that this was all a misunderstanding and she just needed to talk to me. The officers weren't interested in relationship drama. That was about 6 weeks ago, and I haven't heard from Brittany since. The trespass warning apparently got her attention in a way that blocked numbers and changed locks hadn't. Sometimes people need legal consequences to understand that no means no. My house feels peaceful again without someone constantly trying to change things or assert control over decisions. Realized how much stress I'd been carrying from Brittany's boundary-pushing behavior. Being single is actually relaxing compared to managing someone's entitlement issues. The whole experience taught me to pay attention to early warning signs about possessiveness and control. When someone starts referring to your property as theirs, that's not cute or romantic. It's a red flag that they don't respect boundaries. Started dating again recently and been upfront about my living situation, that I own my house and it's not becoming anyone else's unless we're married and they're on the mortgage. Most women understand and appreciate the honesty. One woman I went out with said she respected my boundaries and thought Brittany sounded entitled and delusional. That telling someone to leave their own house shows a complete lack of respect and self-awareness. Nice to date adults who understand property ownership. Brittany apparently moved back in with her parents after wearing out her welcome on her sister's couch. Heard through mutual friends that she's been telling people I was controlling and unreasonable. That I kicked her out for no reason and wouldn't listen to her explanations. Funny how the story changes when you're the one telling it. She conveniently leaves out the part where she told me to get out of my own house, then acted shocked when I took her up on the offer. Some people never take responsibility for their own actions. The locksmith did good work, haven't had any problems with the new keys, and the peace of mind was worth every penny. Sometimes you have to invest in security to protect yourself from people who don't understand boundaries. My neighbor mentioned seeing someone climbing over our fence that day. Brittany was waiting on my deck. Said he almost called the police himself because it looked suspicious. Glad to know the neighbors are looking out for weird behavior. 2 months later, and I'm still glad I ended things when I did. Brittany showed me exactly who she was when she thought she had leverage over my living situation. Sometimes people reveal their true character when they're stressed, and she revealed entitlement and disrespect. The house is still mine, the mortgage is still in my name, and I still make all the decisions about my property. That's how it should be, until someone else is ready to share both ownership and responsibility. Relationships don't erase property rights. Been getting my place ready to potentially sell next year and move somewhere bigger. Nice to make those decisions without someone trying to control the process or demanding input they haven't earned. My house, my choices, my timeline.